Welcome to another edition of the Committed 100 Ministry Group, where we are 100% committed to teaching the Bible to those who are 100% committed to learn. As we continue in our verse-by-verse study of the Gospel of the Book of Mark, we're going to actually get into chapter 10. We kind of got our toe in the door, as it were, in closing last time, but I want to go right into chapter 10 as we begin to look at Jesus's teaching on divorce. And, immediately people have all kinds of things they want to say on divorce and marriage and remarriage and things like that. And it's all so controversial and blah, blah, blah. If you study the whole Bible, and you would have to do it, you realize that context is absolutely important. And I think a lot of teaching on every topic, and I mean every topic you could possibly name under the sun, is that in a lot of places, context, historical, grammatical, literal, and contextual matters are ignored, because Jesus is not giving an arbitrary statement out the blue. He's talking to a specific people, and he's addressing the specifics of their behavior. When Jesus in Luke's gospel talked about the Pharisees versus the publican, when both one went into the temple, one Pharisee, one publican, and the Pharisee said, "I'm glad I'm not like other men." And every single thing he named, if you study the Bible, Jesus named every one of those things that the Pharisee denied as the behavior of the Pharisees. So you have to have a whole biblical view of what's being said. You have to have a contextual view of what's being said. You have to know the people to whom the Lord is speaking to. And just like with the apostles, same truth applies. And we don't ignore that. We don't take context away from a particular topic, or else we're going to start developing our own doctrine. And that's not a good thing. We don't want to use and or misuse God's word to create a doctrine that is favorable to a particular view, whatever. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we are as sound as we can possibly be. And so let's just do the thing that makes sense. Jesus is talking to a specific people. And what is the motive of the people that Jesus is addressing? They don't have any good intent in asking him the question. But the way Jesus answered the question, I'll put it to you this way: it would have been better if they never did. Verse 1 of chapter 10, and he arose from thence and cometh into the coast of Judea by the farther side of Jordan, and the people resort unto him again, and as he was wont, he taught them again. And so, as we said last time, before we get into Jesus' dialogue with the religious leaders again, it's very important to be reminded of what Jesus continued to do whenever people gathered to him. He taught them. And again, I want to emphasize that truth continually, because teaching has fallen on hard times in our age. But this is the example that Jesus gave, and if we are to follow his example, then we are to place a great emphasis on teaching. And I noticed that today, I've noticed it for decades, that teaching has fallen on hard times. Nobody wants to teach, and nobody wants to be taught. And it's incredible to live at a time where we're watching people. There used to be, years ago, on a particular network, and I won't even give the name, but the name of the show was, my brain just fried. Yeah, Short Attention Span Theater. The name of the program was Short Attention Span Theater. And I think, and that was decades ago, and now we're watching in living color Short Attention Span Theater live and in our face. and everybody wants a quick answer or no answer. I mean, it's got to the place, even for me, and it's comical to me, that why is it hard that when you're on someone's post and you want to wish them happy birthday, where it gets to the place where I'm so lazy sometimes, I don't even want to type happy birthday. You're hoping when you type H, I think some of you can relate. I'm not trying to put no guilt on them because I'm talking about myself. But you type H and you want the automatic word remembering to bring up happy. And then if it's birthday, you want to press letter B and hope birthday pops up. If it's anniversary, you want to click A and anniversary pops up. You mean we gotten so we can't even type happy birthday? Short attention span. And I like type the word happy, dude. What's wrong with you? We want stuff so quick. I'm not immune from the madness. I just don't try to be overtaken by it. But I recognize that, as silly as that sounds, that might be symptomatic of a far greater problem. That we have resorted to short attention span theater, which I guess this case be short attention span life. And that's something we don't want. We want to be taught, and teaching takes time. We were in 107 messages in this gospel. Teaching takes time. If that bores you, well, that's your heart condition, not mine. The example that Jesus gave um, to us is that he wants people to teach. And thankfully, the apostles followed his example. And he placed a great emphasis on teaching, and so should we. And this is confirmed by the word want. The word means that which is customary or habitual or conventional or predictable in a good sense, because everywhere Jesus went, he was known as a teacher. So it was customary for him to teach. It was habitual for him to teach. It was conventional and predictable that when people came to see Jesus, he was going to teach them. He was known as a teacher. That's why they wanted to gather around him. And do you notice something about that? How you never read this about the scribes, the Pharisees, and these were the lawgivers and allegedly the teachers and instructors of the people, but they really weren't. That was in name only. It wasn't reality. Wherever Jesus went, crowds, massive crowds followed him to be taught because they knew it was customary that when he showed up, he was going to teach folk. Now, is that true today of you and me? Nah, people want to be taught. See, I don't want to be the person that people could say, you know what? Howard never was a good teacher. No, they'll say that now because they will say, well, he was never a good fill in the blank because he didn't do what we want to do or what we were doing. He was never part of our club or whatever. He never fit in. Harley Howard never fit into anybody's anything. If what you're doing is right and righteous, I'm there with you. If it isn't, I'm not there at all. So no, I'm not going to ever allow somebody to say, unless they're just a bold-faced, stinking, good-for-nothing liar, that I never taught. That's ridiculous. I'm known as a teacher. And even if I'm not known, I'm still a teacher. It was his trademark to do so, and the people gathered to him for teaching. So I don't believe that they always gathered together for healings. Now, obviously, healings took place, but I don't think that they did it for that. Even in Matthew's account of the same event. Now, let's get into this subject about marriage and divorce. And the Pharisees came to him and asked him, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife? Notice the next two words, tempting him. So you have to understand the motivation behind the people who were asking him this question. It had nothing to do with them wanting to really know anything. And that's important in terms of how he responds to them and how, frankly, he convicts them of the very sins that they're involved in, which should be a lesson to us. You don't always have to answer the question in a way that would frame the motive of the person asking the question. And the original Nightlight radio program taught me a great lesson, and that is answer the question that they're not asking. Because I always had a yellow pad of paper with me, something similar to this, had a little sticky paper and I had my pen. And while I was listening to their question, there were times where I did the peanuts, wah, 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 I tuned out and I was writing the question that they didn't ask, but I know they were asking about. And so since we didn't have cameras, they weren't watching me, it was all radio. I would say, let me ask you a question. Okay, blah, blah, blah. They got quiet. Are you there? Yeah, I'm here. Uh, uh. So that happened more times than less when I was addressing the question they didn't ask, trying to avoid getting into the truth by asking a question that was irrelevant. And where did I get that from? I got it from the Lord. He dealt with the things they were not asking. He dealt with their motives. Now, the Pharisees didn't come to learn anything because they thought they already knew the answer. They thought they already knew the answer. So their inquiry was simply another fault-finding mission. These scribes and Pharisees and the religious leaders were always on a fault-finding mission when it came to the Lord. They had no intention to learn a single thing. Just because someone asks a question or a series of questions, even and especially a biblical question, does not necessarily mean that they're ready to want to learn anything. Some people out there trying to trap us. It may be to find fault in your answer and to give rise to a debate or an argument. Now, if there's any platform, of course, that does that 24/7, it would be Facebook, Instagram, all this stuff. These platforms are designed to just foment argument and debate. And that's why I find myself less and less being on it, especially Facebook. I just find it to be a waste. In fact, one of one of the instructors that I know, I asked her, I said, "Did you get off Facebook?" She said, "Yeah, it was unhealthy." And I thought that is true. That it is unhealthy. And I noticed some of my dear friends on Facebook, they get caught up in that vortex of argument and discuss, and I could hear how it affects them physically, mentally, just draining them. And see, I get to a place now where I do a lot less scrolling. When it comes to seeing another picture of LA burning, I just scroll past it. There's no need for me to respond to that kind of foolishness. Not to mention, and because of my knowledge in the audio field, a lot of it is AI. I'm like, this is so clearly fake. And there was one I saw even today where some guy um, threw a bottle at a police officer, which is true, that did happen. And then all of a sudden, the guy comes up, from the other angle, he tackles the guy. And at that moment, a gun suddenly appears. It just appeared out the blue sky. And someone says, "Did you notice the guy had a gun?" I went, "He didn't have a gun. That wasn't there. Someone AI'd that gun, which mysteriously just appeared on the sidewalk." This is the kind of thing that foments debate and argument. Yeah, they should have shot me, but you know, this is the stuff that I think my friend said unhealthy. Yeah, and that's true. That was a lie. He never had a gun. And if he did, it must have been invisible because the gun appeared 3 feet away from him. It just happened. Again, I have 30 years plus actually more than that in the field of video editing. And I know something's fake. And that gun just appeared. but it was nowhere near the guy when he was tackled. And the way he was tackled, seeing I have martial arts experience, there's no way that a gun could fall out of his waist and jettison 5 feet away from his body. There's no way he could have thrown that anywhere because the way he was tackled, there's no way his arms could have thrown it. So you start seeing stuff like this and you go, I don't need to see this junk. I'm not going to be triggered to get all caught up in this stuff. And so I just keep putting up things spiritual. And of course, you get no response to that because no one is interested in the spiritual. They want to see more head busting in LA. It's like, yeah, let's get them. Yeah, I'm glad the Marines are in. We need more of them. I've been an advocate for an entire company of Marines, a battalion. I mean, we need to build a base on the border. I'm all for that. We need to build military bases on the border, not only of Mexico, but in Canada. We need to put military bases on our borders. If we're serious about border control, we need to do that. Why are we spending trillions of dollars building bases in Europe and Asia and other places in the Middle East and what have you, and our own homeland is being invaded? If you had half a brain, you build military bases to cover your own border. Other countries do it. Okay, enough of that. I get myself caught up in the very thing I said I'm not going to get caught up in. So again, because someone has a question or a series of questions doesn't really mean that they want to learn anything. The best way to determine this is always to walk in the spirit and to consider the history of the seekers. This is very important. Sometimes you know the people and you know that they don't mean any good. If they have been antagonistic to the truth all along, chances are that they are continuing their desire to debate and argue, nothing more, nothing less, and nothing else. And we could see once again, not only did the multitudes follow Jesus, but that also the Pharisees followed him, and the scribes and the Sadducees and others, albeit not for the same reason. They continued to attempt to humiliate Jesus before the crowds so as to disgrace his ministry and gospel message before the people. And that's something that I have made mention of over and over again. The purpose of all the scoffers and the mockers, whether it's to you, to me, or to Christ back in his day when he was on earth, or to the apostles, or throughout all of redemptive history, is to discredit us so they can discredit the message. And people are notorious for spreading lies. And the purpose of doing that is to discredit us so therefore we have a discredited message. It's happened to me. It's happened to others. It's happening to others. And it's happening to me. It happened in the past. It's happening right now. I expect it'll happen tomorrow if there is a tomorrow. And this is something that happened to the Lord. Okay. Their hatred towards Jesus increased. And they were relentless in their actions, and they never stopped until they had him killed. Now, the reason why their hatred increased and was relentless was because everywhere Jesus went, more crowds followed him. They weren't following the scribes and the Pharisees. And the scribes and the Pharisees and the Sadducees saw Jesus as a direct threat to their religious system, as a direct threat to their religious industrial complex, which also included the political end, the Sadducees and the Herodians, the political end there, and the nepotism end where, they were all tied in together. The people were just vassals of religion and religionists. They really had no say so. They were under Rome's foot. Rome let them live as long as they did what Rome wanted. Rome didn't want to be bothered with dealing with the Jews and their religion. Let them handle it. Just make sure their leadership serves under us and they can do whatever they want. That's exactly what they did. But the more crowds came to Jesus, and no crowds came to the current religious leaders of that day, the more they wanted him gone. They saw him as a sole threat to their industrial complex. They wanted him gone. But Jesus was well aware of the fact that his time of suffering and death was near. So it didn't bother him because that was part of the plan. They didn't know, but he did, obviously. So they came to test him. Again, it's very important to be reminded that their question had no sincerity about it whatsoever. Nothing. They had already drawn their own two schools of thought on the issue of marriage and divorce. They had already had an opinion about it. So the hypocrisy of wanting to know an answer to their question, as if to say they didn't know, or that they had some doubt of the two views that were widely held and they needed clarity, was simply evil, because they wanted Jesus to pick a side. See, if you pick one side, if you pick Hillel, then those who are part of the Shammai group, oh, we get now he's discredited among us, among the religious leaders. If you pick Shammai and not Hillel, oh my goodness, you're discredited among this group of people and the followers of this group, and your ministry and whatnot is discredited. And Jesus answers neither one. He goes right back to what the scripture says in God's intent for marriage. He picks no side, which is brilliant. He doesn't make himself a vassal of someone else's decisions, which is what people want to do today. Well, are you this? Are you that? How about no? How about neither? Have you thought about I'm neither? No, you got to be. I don't have to be anything you want me to be. And if you want me to be that, well, you go ahead and do it, because I'm not going to be a part of your clown show. Now, they brought up this question about divorce. They wanted his view on their own. Listen carefully. They wanted his view on their own established teachings on divorce, which again proves that their question was totally insincere. Because among the Jewish leaders of that day were two schools of thought regarding a matter of divorce. Those who were somewhat liberal in the misinterpretation of the passage in Deuteronomy followed the school of Hillel, who said it was permissible for a husband to divorce his wife for any reason at all. Didn't have to have any allegedly reasons like American divorces do, irreconcilable differences or whatever, which is still the number one reason why people get divorces, irreconcilable differences. Then you want to be friends after the paperwork is served and everything, all the custody is taken care of and all the furniture is split, but we still want to talk to each other. Why in the world would you want to do that? Wasn't the whole purpose of getting a divorce not to be around that person? But that's coming up later. But the whole idea here is that these people had no intention of wanting to know what Jesus really meant. You got one group that says you can divorce your wife for whatever reason you want. The other group followed the teachings of Shammai, who said that divorce was permissible only for a major offense. See, this is why I keep saying all along that if you're going to start talking about whatever topic it is, you have to start at the origin of where it begins. And the origin of this Q&A has to do with this contextual incident. You don't start grabbing stuff out of a Bible and just start creating stuff without a context. That is a tremendous habitual danger that we're so involved in. You know why we do it? Well, I really don't want to get into that right now because my time is just about done. Maybe next time I'll get into it. But the idea of leaving a context and getting a big banner and a flag and start doing whatever, that's a danger. We have to stay on point, on context. We have to. And if we do that, then we're going to have an understanding of the things that we need to understand about. And we apply that to everything. We'll have an understanding of all things that we need to know. At least we have the foundation of understanding. But you had those two schools. One says you can divorce your wife or whatever. Another says, no, it has to be a major offense. And, that has to be defined, which is what we'll see next time. And the issue is, Jesus says you have to go further back than that. You have to go a little further back than that. And then we're going to see the reason why he talked about this and the way that he responded to them was because his current audience was so notorious in their hypocrisy about marriage and divorce. Then Jesus is going to say, you need to go a little further back. How far back? The beginning, God's intent for marriage. And you're not doing that. Well, then why did Moses give us, the right to write a bill of divorcement? No, well, you're not going back far enough, because that's because your heart was hard, not because it was God's intent. See, we'll talk about that. God willing, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it all. At least we'll try. We'll talk about things in its context, and then we'll see what happens. Because unless we do it like everything else, it's just going to blow up in our face. We don't want that. All right, I'm done. Tomorrow's daylight. Ooh, I got a message for y'all tomorrow. I already heard it, and it's worthy. In fact, I've heard it, I think, a number of times in pieces, but I've heard the full message. It is wowzer. Okay. It just tells everything that we're doing now and the reasons why. It spells out so much reality, so much truth, so much applicable truth to where we are, where we've been, and where we're going as a people and as a church and as a society. Just remarkable. And that's tomorrow on Daylight. Mark your calendar. Monday, this coming Monday, we're not going to have a program because I have a doctor's appointment at 10:30. So I won't be doing any program on Monday. This coming Monday, which is, let me take up my trusty calendar here, which is going to be, the calendar ain't too, there we go. The calendar is, what is that? The 16th. So there will be no Committed 100 program on the 16th because I have a doctor's appointment. I guess the doctor wants to see if I'm still breathing, which, no joke, is a good thing. So Lord willing, we'll see you tomorrow on Daylight. And again, context, context, context. And remember that, and you're going to be fine. All right. God bless.